5 years ago, Lucy believed her life was destroyed when her father forced her to cancel her wedding. He said he had taken her best interest at heart and told her that Jake didn't have the right intentions. Young and impressionable, she had listened to him and broken off the engagement as she felt her dreams and happiness being stripped away. However, when she found the true reason for her father's manipulations, she knew she couldn't let that slide, and she would do it in a way that neither he nor anyone else would see coming. Lucy had been young and naive 5 years ago. She had been an impressionable 20-year-old who had believed her father wanted whatever was best for her. In hindsight, she couldn't have been more wrong about that, but on that fateful day, the evidence he had given her had been enough to persuade her. She remembered it like it was yesterday. She was standing in her bridal robes with her bridesmaids in her bridal suite. She had finished doing her hair and makeup, though they would stay behind for her final touch-up. It would be right after she had put on her dress. Her mother was holding up the beautiful gown with a radiant smile when the door to the bridal suite suddenly burst open. It had startled everyone in the room. The calm atmosphere that was there to combat Lucy's pre-wedding jitters immediately disappeared as all laughter stopped, and all heads turned to see who had burst through the door. "Adam? What are you doing here?" Lucy's mother had said, confusion on her face. Adam, Lucy's father, was red in the face as he was holding back, panting. Had he run all the way here? Why had he been in such a hurry? It almost seemed like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for Lucy's father to speak, and he looked thunderous. Lucy had seen her father in the mirror and started to turn around, her brow furrowed at the interruption. "What is the matter, Dad?" Before he answered, he took a few long strides into the room. That way, he was almost right behind Lucy. It made her turn in her entirety, confusion clear on her face. But, before she could ask again, her father broke his silence. "Lucy, you look absolutely lovely, but I am afraid you cannot marry Tom. Not now, and not ever." Hearing those words coming from her father's lips, Lucy was immediately taken aback, taking one step back from him without actually meaning to. "What? Dad, what do you—" Lucy stammered, but her mother interrupted her before she could continue her question. The happiness had drained from her mother's face, a serious look flashing in her eyes. "Adam, what did you find?" Mary, Lucy's mother, said severely. To Lucy, it seemed like she knew what was going on. Had her parents done something behind her back? She hated that they were being this cryptic. Why couldn't they just say what they meant? "Mom, Dad, what have you two done?" Lucy asked, needing some clarity. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I had hoped to find this way before your wedding day, but Tom had been masterful in hiding it from us." He quickly looked at his wife, who nodded at him before continuing. "Something in my gut had always warned me about Tom. He would always give me an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, and now I know it has been right all along." They had her sit down on a chair, putting her dress on the side as they showed her the evidence Adam had found and put together. She had been listening with tears in her eyes as Lucy's life, or the life she wished to have, was falling apart in 1,000 different pieces. They had shown her his manipulation tactics, and she had been stupid enough to believe them. "Well, how do I get out of this?" Lucy said, after hearing the proof her parents, but especially her father, had gathered. She didn't know if she could face Tom after everything her father had shown her. "Honey, you and your mother can just leave. I will make sure to stay here and inform the police. You never have to see him again." Lucy had listened to him. If only she had talked to Tom herself, everything would have been different. "Lucy, we need to go now," Mary said urgently, gathering Lucy's bag and the train of her dress in a hurried motion. Lucy's eyes, filled with tears, met her mother's in a silent plea as they darted through the crowded venue to the car, waiting with its engine humming softly. The stark light of day seemed cruel, and as Lucy sank into the back seat, the finality of leaving felt like an unspoken goodbye to her dreams. In the back seat, wrapped in her bridal gown, Lucy's sobs broke the silence. "It was all supposed to be perfect," she cried, clutching the delicate fabric of her dress as if trying to hold on to her shattered dreams. Mary reached over from the driver's seat, squeezing her hand. "I'm so sorry, Lucy." "We'll get through this," she said, trying to bridge the gap of Lucy's despair with her own steady presence. The car sped along, the world outside blurring past the windows. Lucy stared out, her gaze empty, the passing trees a green blur. Mary kept her eyes on the road, but watched Lucy through the rearview mirror. "Thinking about everything?" her mom asked, her voice a soft coax. Lucy just nodded, lost in the whirl of her own turmoil, the silence between them stretching out, filled with unsaid words. Pulling up to the small cottage, Mary turned to Lucy with a gentle smile. "This will be your haven for now," she said as they stepped inside. The cottage, cozy and warm with sunlight streaming through the windows, felt like a hug. "It's peaceful, away from all the noise," Mary added, hoping the quiet would soothe Lucy's bruised heart as they left the outside world and its judgments at the door. Lucy learned from distant whispers and cautious conversations that Tom had been sentenced to 10 to 20 years. At night, alone in her room, the shadows seemed to murmur his name. "He's gone, Lucy. It's over," she whispered to herself, a mantra against the darkness. Yet, her heart wrestled with a tangle of relief and unresolved pain, unaware that soon an old friend's message would stir the still waters of her past. It had been 5 years of normalcy when Lucy's phone buzzed with a message that jolted her more than the coffee she was drinking. "Lucy, it's Eliza. We need to talk. It's about Tom. He's innocent." Her heart skipped a beat. Innocent? But how? Eliza's words swirled in her mind, urging her to meet and talk. Lucy stared at the message, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed, "Can we meet today?" The past she thought she'd buried was clawing its way back. Lucy sat, stunned, her coffee forgotten, cooling into bitterness. 5 years of anger, 5 years of pain. Had it all been a mistake? She replayed every harsh word, every tear, every moment of despair. "Could I have been wrong?" she murmured to herself, feeling the weight of years spent under a shadow of resentment that might have been misplaced. The room felt suddenly claustrophobic as she contemplated the magnitude of her misplaced judgments. Later that day, Eliza sat across from Lucy at the park, papers rustling in her hand. "Look, here's the proof. The charges against Tom were dropped last week," she explained, pushing the documents toward Lucy. "Someone else was behind the schemes, and Tom was framed." Lucy's eyes scanned the documents, disbelief and relief warring within her. "I can't believe this. All this time, the truth was buried," she whispered, feeling the ground shift beneath her. Back at home, Lucy paced her living room, each step a mix of hope and confusion. "Could I have been so wrong about Tom?" she asked the empty room, her voice echoing slightly off the walls. The possibility of a massive misunderstanding loomed over her, daunting yet filled with a strange sense of hope. She stopped by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of forgiveness and new beginnings, pondering her next steps. Determined, Lucy picked up her phone again, her fingers steady this time. "Tom, It's Lucy. Can we meet? I think there's a lot we need to discuss. A pause, then a response. Yes, I'd like that. How about the cafe downtown? Tomorrow at noon, Lucy agreed, feeling a resolve solidifying within her. She was ready to confront the past, to untangle the web of lies, and maybe find a path to reconciliation. Lucy stepped into the cafe, her heart thumping in her chest. She glanced around and caught sight of a few friends scattered around, their presence a quiet reassurance. They offered her small, encouraging smiles. Lucy tried to smile back, her nervousness palpable as she adjusted the strap of her purse, feeling the weight of the impending conversation. "A latte, please?" Lucy ordered from the waitress, her hands slightly trembling as she handed over the money. Lucy scanned the room, looking for Tom. The cafe buzzed with the chatter of other patrons, the clink of cups, a distracting melody. Every door opening sent her gaze darting towards it, but Tom was nowhere yet. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Just as the barista placed a steaming cup of coffee before her, the bell above the door jingled again. This time, it was Tom. Lucy's heart skipped a beat, then raced furiously as he walked in. He scanned the room, his eyes finally landing on her. She tried to steady her breathing, her hands tightening around the warm cup. Tom approached with a hesitant step, his expression a mix of apprehension and resolve. He pulled out the chair and sat down across from her, their eyes meeting briefly before both looked away. "Hi, Lucy," he said, his voice slightly shaky. Lucy nodded, struggling to find her voice, the simple greeting laden with years of unspoken words. Tom sat down, and Lucy fought to keep her composure. Her emotions were a tumultuous storm beneath her calm exterior. She clasped her hands together on the table, her knuckles whitening. "Tom," she finally managed, her voice a whisper. Tom nodded, looking equally emotional. They shared a moment of silent acknowledgement, both aware of the gravity of what was about to be discussed. "Lucy, I know this is hard," Tom began, his voice tinged with nervous energy. He adjusted his seat, leaning forward, hands clasped as if to gather his thoughts. "There's a lot I need to explain about what really happened." Lucy nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. She clasped her coffee cup, her fingers tracing the rim as she braced herself to hear his side of the story after all these years. Tom cleared his throat, his eyes searching hers for understanding. "I was wrongfully incarcerated, Lucy. It took years to prove my innocence." His voice faltered a bit as he recounted the years lost, the legal battles fought. "I never stopped fighting, because I knew I had to come back to explain. To you." Lucy listened, her coffee untouched, as Tom's story unfolded, a narrative of misplaced justice and enduring hope. "But there's more," Tom continued, pausing to gauge Lucy's reaction. "Your father, he was involved deeper than you know." Lucy's eyes widened in shock, her grip tightening on the coffee cup. "What do you mean, Tom?" "My father?" she asked, her voice a whisper of betrayal and confusion. Tom nodded slowly, the weight of his next words hanging heavily in the air between them. Lucy's emotions churned as she listened. Her heart ached with a softening sorrow for Tom, but her mind wrestled with skepticism. "How could all this be true?" she murmured under her breath, almost too low for Tom to hear. He noticed her struggle, reaching across the table, trying to bridge the gap of years and hurt with a look of earnest pleading in his eyes. "Lucy, despite everything, I never stopped caring about you," Tom said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've held on to the hope that maybe you could understand, maybe even forgive." He let the words hang, a silent plea etched in his gaze. Lucy felt a rush of old feelings mingling with new uncertainties, her heart caught between past affections and the shadows of doubt that lingered. "Lucy, your father used his corporate influence to frame me," Tom said, his voice steady but laden with the weight of what he was revealing. "He manipulated evidence, twisted facts, to make sure I'd be out of the picture." Lucy stared, her face draining of color as the foundations of what she believed started to crumble. "Why would he do that to you? To us?" she stammered, grappling with the scale of the betrayal. In disbelief, Lucy pushed back her chair and stood up, her movements shaky. "This can't be. I can't handle this right now," she said, her voice breaking as she prepared to leave. The cafe seemed to spin around her, each patron's face blurring into the next. Tom's story was too much, the pain and shock too intense to process in the clamor of the crowded room. As Lucy turned to leave, Tom reached out and gently caught her wrist. "Please, Lucy, just hear me out. There's more you need to know," he pleaded, his eyes imploring her to stay. After a tense moment, Lucy exhaled sharply and nodded, sinking back down into her chair. She folded her arms, a protective barrier against the onslaught of truths she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Tom pulled a small folder from his bag and laid it on the table. "Look at these," he said, as he spread out documents and emails detailing the corporate sabotage. Lucy leaned in, her eyes scanning the evidence that Tom laid out before her. Each line she read tied her father's actions closer to the injustice Tom had suffered. "How did you get these?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and dread. As Lucy sifted through the documents, her initial shock morphed into a piqued curiosity. The pieces began to fit together, aligning oddly with doubts she had once pushed aside. "I always wondered why things didn't add up," she murmured, looking up at Tom with new eyes. "And now, seeing this, it's starting to make sense." Her mind raced, the seeds of suspicion now sprouting into a tangle of betrayal and potential truth. Tom pulled out more documents, each one meticulously marked with discrepancies that had gone unnoticed or ignored during his trial. "See here and here, dates that don't match, signatures that can't be verified," he pointed out. Lucy leaned closer, her eyes tracing the lines of evidence that Tom laid out like a map to his innocence. "It's all here. Everything that was used against me was manipulated," Tom explained, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. As Lucy examined the detailed evidence Tom presented, her skepticism began to wane, replaced by a dawning realization of the truth. This is convincing, Tom," she admitted, touching the edge of a particularly damning email. "I can see now how they constructed the case against you." Her eyes, once filled with doubt, now showed the clear signs of understanding and empathy as the pieces fell into place. Tom's voice softened, and he reached across the table, his hand hesitating in the air before it fell back to his side. "Lucy, I've never stopped loving you. These years apart, they've been the hardest of my life," he confessed, his eyes not leaving hers. "I regret every day that we lost because of this." Lucy listened, her heart a mix of emotions, old wounds reopening, yet touched by his enduring affection. Lucy sat back, her mind racing as she processed everything Tom had shared. She was torn between the relief of understanding and the pain of having believed a lie for so long. "How could I have been so blind?" she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of years spent under a false belief about the man she once loved. Her past convictions clashed with the revelations, leaving her heart and mind in turmoil. Gradually, as Lucy absorbed the full extent of her father's deception, her initial shock and hurt transformed into a burning anger. He manipulated us all, she said, her voice low and firm. He stole our years together, Tom. The realization made her stomach churn, and she clenched her fists on the table, her nails digging into her palms. Her sense of betrayal deepened, yet it was directed now not at Tom, but at her father. Lucy felt a whirlwind of emotions, but knew she needed space to think. Tom, I need some time to process all of this, she said, her voice steady but gentle. Tom nodded, understanding her need for space, and handed her his business card. Call me when you're ready, he said. As Lucy clutched the card, she felt a mix of apprehension and determination stirring within her. Back home, Lucy sat at her computer, her fingers poised over the keyboard. She delved into researching her father's company, searching for any signs of the murky dealings Tom had described. Hours passed as she clicked through articles, corporate filings, and public records, her eyes growing tired but her resolve strengthening with each piece of information that seemed suspiciously out of place. Lucy's research led her to financial records and emails stored on a rarely used family-shared cloud service. As she sifted through the documents, she found undeniable evidence that corroborated Tom's story. The emails detailed transactions and communications that clearly linked her father to unethical practices aimed at sabotaging Tom. Each discovery tightened the knot in her stomach, confirming her worst fears. With a heavy heart, Lucy began to document all the evidence she had gathered. She printed emails, highlighted bank statements, and took notice on each piece of incriminating information. As she organized the documents into a coherent file, she steeled herself for the confrontation that was to come. He needs to explain this, she muttered to herself, her determination palpable in the quiet of her home office. Once everything was documented, Lucy picked up her phone and dialed Tom. "I've found proof, Tom. Everything you said. It's all true," she confessed, her voice a mixture of relief and renewed pain. "What should I do next?" she asked, seeking his guidance. As they discussed her next steps, Lucy felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they began to plan how to bring the truth to light. Lucy met Tom in the quiet corner of their favorite park, her heart full of apologies. "Tom, I'm so sorry for doubting you," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I trust you completely now." Tom smiled warmly, taking her hands in his. "Lucy, there's nothing to apologize for. What matters is that we're together now," he reassured her, his eyes reflecting a depth of understanding and forgiveness. Tom's expression turned hopeful as he looked into Lucy's eyes. "I never stopped wanting a life with you. Will you marry me, Lucy, once all this is settled?" he asked, his voice earnest. Lucy felt a surge of love and nodded emphatically. "Yes, Tom, I will marry you. But first, we need to make things right," she said, her resolve firming at the thought of confronting her father. Determined, Lucy and Tom sat down with all the evidence spread out before them. "We need to expose everything, show the world what he did," Lucy said, her voice tinged with anger but also a sense of purpose. Tom nodded in agreement. "It's only fair after what he's done. He kept us apart for 5 years. It's time he faced the consequences of his actions," he added, his hand squeezing hers in solidarity. As they plotted their course of action, Lucy felt a sense of empowerment washing over her. For years, she'd lived under the shadow of her father's deceit, but now she was ready to step into the light. "With you by my side, I can do anything, Tom," she said, her voice filled with determination and relief. Tom smiled, his presence a comforting assurance that they were in this together. Feeling ready to confront the past, Lucy knew the road ahead would be tough but necessary. "We have to be careful, Tom. He can't know we're together again. Not yet, she cautioned, thinking ahead to her interactions with her father. Tom nodded in agreement, understanding the need for discretion. We'll play it cool until we're ready to strike. We've got the upper hand now, he affirmed, his confidence bolstering Lucy's resolve. Lucy visited her father, masking her renewed ties with Tom behind a practiced smile. "How's the business, Dad?" she asked innocently, sipping tea across from him in the sunlit living room. Her father, pleased by her interest, didn't notice the ulterior motives behind her casual inquiries. "Business is good, Lucy, very good," he boasted, unaware that each detail he divulged fed into Lucy's hidden agenda. During their conversations, Lucy steered her father toward more specific topics about the company. "So, who handles these contracts?" she probed, feigning curiosity. Her father, ever eager to showcase his acumen, elaborated on his business dealings, not realizing that Lucy was mentally cataloging every piece of potentially incriminating evidence. "We have our ways of ensuring things go our way," he said with a wink, oblivious to Lucy's true intentions. As her father warmed up to the conversation, he shared more than he ought to. "You know, securing that big contract wasn't easy, but I have my methods," he confided, leaning back in his chair with a proud grin. Lucy nodded, encouraging him further while her heart raced with the significance of his unwitting disclosures. Every detail was a potential key to unlocking the justice she and Tom sought. Lucy continued her visits, each time feigning fascination with her father's business prowess. "That's quite a strategy. How did you come up with it?" she'd ask, her eyes wide with feigned admiration. Inside, she was coldly calculating, storing away every piece of evidence. Her father, basking in her apparent admiration, missed the calculating glint in her eye, mistaking it for genuine interest. Back in her own space, Lucy confidently documented her findings. She organized notes, recorded discrepancies, and prepared detailed files from the conversations with her father. Each piece of evidence was carefully aligned with Tom's claims, strengthening their case. "We're getting closer, Tom," she whispered into her phone late one night, determination firm in her voice. She was ready for the next step, feeling the weight of their impending confrontation growing heavier. Lucy slipped into her father's office, her heart pounding as she accessed his laptop. There it was, clear as day. A folder marked "Confidential," filled with emails and documents that spelled out his manipulation tactics and fraud. Lucy's fingers trembled as she opened file after file, each one a conclusive link in the chain of evidence against him. "This is it," she whispered, a mix of relief and dread settling over her. Quickly, Lucy transferred all relevant files onto a USB drive, making sure she left no trace of her access. She copied emails, contracts, and internal communications that detailed her father's unethical practices. With each click, the reality of her actions cemented itself. She was about to expose her own father to save Tom. The weight of her decision bore down on her, but she knew there was no turning back. With the evidence secure, Lucy called the police. Her voice was steady as she explained the situation. "I have proof of significant corporate fraud and other illegal activities by my father." The officer on the line listened intently, taking notes. "We'll need to see all the evidence you've gathered," he said. Lucy agreed, setting up a time to meet and hand over the documents. She hung up, feeling the wheels of justice beginning to turn. Lucy requested to be there when the police arrested her father. "I need to be present, to see it for myself," she insisted over the phone to the detective in charge. "I understand. We'll coordinate with you," the detective replied, acknowledging the depth of her involvement. Lucy noted down the details, knowing that witnessing her father's arrest would be the final step in freeing both herself and Tom from the past. As the day of the arrest drew near, Lucy prepared herself emotionally to face her father. She practiced what she might say, how she might feel seeing him taken away. In the quiet of her room, she looked at herself in the mirror, her reflection stealing into resolve. "You can do this," she murmured. "It's time for the truth." With each rehearsed word, she braced herself for the confrontation that would change everything. As the police cars pulled up, Lucy and Tom stood together outside her father's office building. Their hands were linked, a physical manifestation of their unity. Lucy felt Tom's grip tighten as officers walked past them, heading towards the entrance. She watched, heart pounding, the culmination of their struggle about to unfold. It was a moment of vindication, and having Tom by her side made her feel invincible. Her father emerged from the office in handcuffs, his expression one of confusion and anger. Spotting Lucy, he shouted, "Lucy, why? How could you do this to your own father?" His voice cracked with desperation. Lucy felt a chill, even as she steeled herself. "You brought this on yourself," she called back, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside her. This confrontation was inevitable, yet it stung with every word exchanged. "I trusted you, Dad. You betrayed me? For what? Power? Control?" Lucy's voice rose, a cathartic outburst as she confronted him amidst the bustling crowd of onlookers. Her father looked bewildered, his plea for understanding drowned out by her accusations. "You destroyed everything I cared about," she continued, her words fueled by years of manipulation and hurt. It was her moment to reclaim her voice. Her father's pleas grew more desperate. "Lucy, please, I can explain. Just give me a chance," he implored, his eyes searching hers for any sign of softening. But Lucy was resolute. "Save it for your trial. Enjoy your time in prison," she retorted coldly, turning away to shield her pained expression. Tom squeezed her shoulder in silent support, his presence a comforting force amidst the upheaval. As her father was led away, Lucy's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of the moment settling on her. Relief washed over her, knowing justice was being served, but sorrow lingered for the father she once loved. Tom wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "It's over, Lucy," he murmured. She nodded, leaning into his embrace, feeling the complexity of her emotions. She was free, yet the journey ahead loomed large. In a crowded courtroom, the gavel fell with a final, resounding thud. "Guilty on all counts," declared the judge. Lucy and Tom held hands tightly, relief flooding through them as Adam was found guilty. His crimes, now publicly acknowledged, marked the end of a painful chapter. Lucy's eyes met Tom's, and in them she saw not just the end of this ordeal, but the beginning of everything new. After the trial, Lucy and Tom sat in a quiet cafe, discussing their next steps. "We can't just go back to how things were," Lucy said, determination in her tone. Tom nodded in agreement. "Your family, there's too much pain there." They decided it was best to cut ties, to build their future on healthier grounds, free from the shadows of betrayal. As they planned their separation from her family, Lucy hesitated. "And Mom?" she asked, unsure. Tom looked at her with a gentle but firm expression. "Lucy, she must have known," he said softly. Lucy sighed, knowing he was right. The realization hurt, but she knew they needed a fresh start, one that couldn't include those who had been complicit in her father's schemes. With the trial behind them, Lucy and Tom walked through the park, discussing their dreams and plans. "Let's travel, see everything we missed," Tom suggested, his eyes bright with excitement. Lucy laughed, the sound bubbling up freely. "Yes, and maybe a small wedding. Just us. They talked late into the evening, making plans to recover the time they'd lost, their spirits lifted by the possibilities ahead. As the sun set over the city, Lucy and Tom stood together, looking out at the skyline from their apartment balcony. "We're really free," Lucy murmured, leaning into Tom. "Yes, we are," he replied, wrapping an arm around her. Below them, the city buzzed with life, a symbol of their new beginning. Hopeful and vindicated, they faced a future together, free from the shadows of the past, with Adam's lengthy prison sentence sealing their peace.